Actors, we've all got issues, so let's talk about them. I'm your host, Juan Ayala, and this is Actors with Issues. Hello, ladies, gents, and non-binary friends. Welcome to another episode of Actors with Issues, where we talk shop with guests from TV, film, and Broadway. Today's guest is a renowned acting coach known for his teaching methods that have led to the transformative performances from his clients, including Jeremy Allen White, Rami Malek, Lee Pace, and Dakota Johnson. He's the founder of the Markland Studio in Los Angeles and has his first book, We All Act, coming out summer 2024. It's John Markland. John, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
It's nice to meet you, Juan. Thanks for having me on.
So walk us through the early days. So how did we get to where we are today? Did you always know you wanted to be an instructor? Were you an actor at some point in your career? How did we get here today?
I don't know if one can imagine being an acting coach. Um, I, it was a very torturous, windy road to get here, but it started with writing. Um, I was a troubled teenager, and I found that writing was a way to kind of get a better understanding of myself and the world I found myself in. And then in college, that turned into short story writing and then playwriting. And then the playwriting led me to the drama department. I bounced around to a couple of different universities, but always found that that was kind of my tribe where I felt most comfortable. And kind of had this feeling like, oh, I've been doing this my entire life. Um, People call it acting, but I'm like, well, I feel like this is what we do in our everyday lives, every one of us. And so kind of just got sucked into it from there, and then started working when I emigrated to America. Started working with some acting coaches, Sandra Seacat primarily, who introduced me to the studio's method, to active imagination, Jungian theory, and dream work. And that was a whole other level of discovery for myself. Um, and then I started a theater company called the Moth Theater Company, and I was very lucky to have some very talented actors involved in the early days of the theater company. And through writing, directing, producing plays, that's kind of where I began to get introduced to a lot of the actors I now coach. And it was people asking me to teach, people asking me to coach. I never intended for this to be my career, but I did at some point begin to recognize, you know what, we've all been kind of following the same acting principles and acting techniques for 60, 50, 60, 70 years now. You know, Stanislavski brought them over, and Strasberg, you know, this sense memory work method, and I loved it. It got me to places, but at the same time, I often felt exploited as an actor. I felt like I would get to emotional places and be able to express them, but the more often I went back to these emotional places, I found it harder and harder to connect to the emotions of those memories and those wounds and those traumas and those experiences. And so I was, why is this? Why do I feel like I'm using up my emotions? And so then start studying more of the Jungian theory and recognize that, well, it's the idea of using anything is unsustainable, that there's an exploitive nature to it. And so that's when I started playing with this idea of, well, what if there was a cathartic nature to it? What if there was an intention? And when you go back to these sense memories and these moments and experiences, to actually elevate them or free them or even heal them, you know, so there's this sense of movement. And it really began to connect to a lot of the actors I was working with. And that was kind of where the studio suddenly exploded. Actors I was working with started to gain a lot of success, a lot of recognition. And that's been about 10 years in the making.
I love that approach because I feel sort of similar as an actor myself, you know, that lots of times like you're asked to use these things that happen to you as triggers, which can be helpful, but like you said, in the long term, you almost become desensitized to it. And like you
100%.
said, you start to lose that connection of like because
Yeah, I
you start
think
to
I
own.
think like I think naturally we have this, you know, self-survival. We're built to survive, and our emotions are how we kind of unconsciously navigate through the world. And so if we keep going to this place where we were injured or we felt insecure or there was doubt or, you know, even a lack of confidence, um, you're re-injuring yourself each time you go to it and bring it back up. Your body and your emotions don't know it's not happening again. And so you have to be very clear on, if I'm going to go back to these places, it's not with an intention to use, it's with an intention to share, and also with an intention to take care of, right? To nurture, to have compassion for, empathy for, to allow emotions that suddenly become stagnated to move again. Because otherwise, you're right. Like we develop this, it's almost like a protective envelope around it, so we won't re-injure ourselves anymore. And it's tough because, you know, a lot of studios and production companies and producers send me actors, and they're in a bit of a state of post-traumatic stress syndrome. And it's because they've been diving into this place, and suddenly they have high anxiety, panic attacks, and feel like they have an emotional block. And it's like, well, yeah, it makes sense. And so let's go back to this place and begin to take care of, have compassion, and begin to build trust up with yourself again with the expression of the emotion.
And do you feel that there are any? I mean, I'm sure it's a laundry list, but any misconceptions that actors have about acting when they first come into the industry? Sort of, anything that comes to mind that could be. I feel like lots of people talk constantly about method acting, and
Yeah,
they have a certain
you know,
concept of what that is.
methods wonderful. Like it revolutionized, you know, the style of acting that had been accepted for 100, 200 years before then, to make it more naturalistic, to personalize it so it was coming from a place from within. And I think it really helped actors grasp this sense of, it doesn't have to be just performance, it can be an experience. Um, I love it as a research tool. I think it's great when actors can take a character, go out into the real world, and experience, you know, what it would be to have the backstory of the character, to have the body, the voice, the dialect, the expressions, the gestures, and try it out with real people, because it's going to inform you better than any scene work can. But you have to recognize that, okay, you're not that, right? Like you're still you, and part of you wants to be expressed, needs to be expressed, and it's also your responsibility to have an interpretation of the character. um, and so I think the method, yeah, like I love the method as a research tool. I don't always feel like it's the strongest way to enter into a play or get in front of the camera. I think at a certain point you have to acknowledge yourself and allow part of yourself to be in it too.
Yeah, I love that that perspective on and using it as a research. So I completely agree. I think that
Yeah.
um, sometimes it has gotten phenomenal performances out of people, but at the same time, those actors then need like a year off to recover from everything that they
Yeah,
ended up putting themselves through.
you're putting yourself under conditions that aren't organically or naturally you. And life is a practice. Everything we do is a practice. And so if you're practicing another life, then yeah, you're stepping outside of what is naturally you. And so there's going to be an adjustment to get back to you. And you're right. Like I think a lot of people get a little bit lost, and so it takes them some time to come back.
And of all the actors that you've worked with, is there any one in particular that you feel had sort of the biggest breakthrough during the process of coaching with them that you had this really
Um,
transformative sort of
I
experience?
think they've all had amazing growth and jumps and evolution, and I can't take credit for, you know, like that's them and their courage, their trust, their own innate sense of discovery. I definitely feel like at times I'm shining a light into a dark place, or you know, a place that no one's been, and being like, hey, can you go over there? But at the end of the day, they have to have the courage and the trust in self to go there. Um, there are journeys I've been on, certainly with Rami, you know, working with him from just before Mr. Robot and through Mr. Robot, um, um, and his sense of giving himself over to it, and recognizing that also he's part creator. Like I think a lot of times actors suddenly feel like my job is this narrow job of being told what to do by the director, and trying to find the writer's intention. And I think you devalue the craft of acting when you look at it that way. You're as valuable as the writer, Your opinion is as valid as the director's. Yes, the director has the vision, has to think of the scope of the story, but you have to be the one living it. And so I think at that point, he began to take on a little bit more responsibility for not pushing back, but holding the integrity of the character. Talking to Sam about, well, this is what I'm feeling, and my instinct as the character is I would do this. And Sam's one of those generous geniuses that was like, do it. You know, I trust you. I chose you for this. And so Rami began to build his confidence. And in building the confidence with the character and understanding, oh, I can listen to my instincts, was then able to go into darker places and deeper places within himself and share it because he had that sense of trust that was around him. You know, it really is a collaboration. And I think any good writer has this idea that I intended this with my writing, but I want to pass it over to a writer and director so that they can reveal to me things that I didn't know I intended. And there's that's the beauty of it, it's the magic of it, is when all those moving parts look at each other and be like, yeah, I trust you, I trust your instinct.
And I love that that approach is, I mean, just from the title of your book, We All Act, is the sort of can already tell what sort of your perspective is and what your techniques are and things like that. So, what do you think folks will look forward to most with your book coming out next year?
Um, I hope that they get a sense of self and realize that, you know, the greatest acting school is life. But you have to be able to bring yourself present and be aware, and also to have empathy for yourself. Because if you're in a state of criticizing or judging yourself, you're shut down. You're living such a narrowed version of yourself because you're trying to censor yourself. And so you meet someone in a coffee shop and you start having a conversation, not to jump to, I want this person to think this about me or see me this way. To like have the presence of mind and the awareness to be like, hey, this is where I'm at and this is what I'm going through. And I'm not going to try to tell you my life's great or that I'm like starting this thing, because I'm not, I'm struggling and da, da, da. And that empowers the truth of an actor. And it also lets them realize, oh, this is my act. This is my natural veil that I put up. And you begin to realize that there's so many context changes during a day that you go through, whether it's, you know, talking to your parents or talking to your friends or talking to someone that you have the hots for or meeting someone that you're trying to impress. We have acts that we try on. And so as an actor, if you can become present to those, you begin to realize, oh, I have some of the most nuanced, subtle characters ever. But I look at them and think they're me, and they're not. They're acts for an identity for how you want to be seen, how you want to be received. And so allow them to be characters for you. Otherwise, you're doing a double act. You're acting through your identity, then trying to play a character on the other side of that. It's like, no, these are characters. And I think there's a lot of actors who do have that sense of presence, right? The call upon, like, oh, this reminds me when I'm in this situation. I'm just gonna let this play.
I think that's been a pretty big through line of with the you know with the many folks we've had on the show is uh, that life is, you know, the best way to become a better actor is to go out and live life, experience new things, so you have more to draw upon.
You have to. Like, yeah, like we live such a narrowed version of ourselves because, you know, we seek safety, right? That's our primary one of our primary drives. And so we build lives, and within those lives, we then create patterns. We have habituated routines. We ritualize certain aspects of our life. But the minute that you put pattern on something, you're you're doing it day and day and day and day and day and day. And so the idea of living an artist's life is, how do I disrupt my patterns? Because you can't grow or discover from a place of safety. Like the two just don't exist. And so you have to get into this sense of, if I'm to grow, if I'm to evolve, and I'm to get really tap into the potential I know I can feel in my heart, then you have to take the risk to break your patterns. And but with that does come fear, does come anxiety, because you're not in the safe zone anymore. But what you are doing is you're outpacing all those other people that are just, no, this is the way I do it. This is the way I drive every day to this. This is my drink every day. This is the way. And it's like, sure, there's comfort in it. But again, you're not evolving. And if you really want to become who you know in your heart you can become, then you've got to disrupt your life. And it's got to be, and that is the artist's life. It's one of disruption.
And quickly before we go, we always ask our guests at the end of our interviews, in 10 words or less, what advice would you give to a young actor?
To look deep within And if you could do this for the rest of your life without being paid for it, just for the joy and the love and the discovery, then do it.
And if anyone has or wants to work with you or collaborate with you in some way, where can they find more information and connect with you?
The Markland Studio, it's www.marklandstudio.com. Right now, we kind of bounce back and forth between Theater 68 in North Hollywood and Atwater Village Theater over in Atwater. We have 4 or 5 in-person classes. We usually have 2 Zoom classes going year-round. So, yeah, I'm always looking for fresh souls to dive in. Yeah.
John, thank you for joining us and for chatting with us about, technique and for everything you do. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Juan. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to Actors with Issues on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel for full video interviews. Actors with Issues is executive produced and hosted by Juan Ayala. See you next time.